Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're going to unpack one of the most baffling, just absolutely terrifying aviation disasters in recent memory, the crash of China Eastern Airlines flight MU-5735. Our main goal here is to cut through the noise. We need to separate the verified facts from all that panicked speculation, especially the rampant fear that this was just another massive technical failure by Boeing. So we're going to look at the hard evidence to figure out exactly what happened up there. Here's our docket for today. First, we'll look at the impossible dive. Then, we'll rule out the elements, explain why this was absolutely not a MAX malfunction, cover the chilling conclusion investigators arrived at, and finally ask, are planes still safe? Let's dive in. Part 1. The Impossible Dive, March 21, 2022. A flight defies aerodynamics. Picture this. It's a totally routine 2-hour passenger flight from Kunming to Guangzhou. But about an hour after takeoff, the unthinkable happens. The aircraft plummets nearly 30,000 feet right from its cruising altitude. Now, to put that into perspective for you, if a commercial jet suffers a massive engine failure, the wings are designed to make it glide. It would slowly descend, right? But flight MU-5735 didn't glide at all. It fell from 30,000 feet in a near vertical nosedive. And here's the part that truly shocked the experts. It covered that massive drop in just 1 minute and 35 seconds. Literally, that is the terminal velocity of a skydiver in freefall. We are not talking about a massive aerodynamic passenger jet anymore. Distant camera footage actually caught the plane falling straight down, completely defying every standard protocol of an in-flight emergency. Tracing the altitude data reveals a terrifying sequence. Takeoff at 1:11 p.m., perfectly normal. For over an hour, it's cruising smoothly at 29,000 feet. Then, at exactly 2:20 p.m., that sudden vertical plunge kicks in. But pay close attention to 2:21 p.m. Right around 8,000 feet, there is this strange, super brief ascent. The plane actually pulled up and regained a bit of altitude before its final crash. That's a massive clue. It strongly points to a desperate physical struggle for control right before impact. Moving to part 2. Ruling out the elements, investigating external factors and environment. To make sense of that terrifying timeline, we have to play a game of process of elimination. The first suspect is always extreme weather, right? But data straight from the China Meteorological Administration shows that at 2 p.m., conditions were perfectly fine for flying. We're talking 30 degrees Celsius, normal moderate winds, over 10 miles of visibility, and 0 precipitation. Now, yes, heavy rain did roll in later that evening, which tragically delayed the recovery of the black boxes in those thick forests. But the elements, they played absolutely no role in bringing this plane down. All right, part 3, not a MAX malfunction. Let's talk about the critical difference in Boeing models. With weather totally out of the picture, public attention immediately snapped to the manufacturer. Because of those highly publicized crashes back in 2018 and 2019, everybody was terrified, asking, was this another fundamental Boeing design flaw? Getting this specific detail right is absolutely crucial. Those infamous Lion Air and Ethiopian Airlines crashes involved the Boeing 737 MAX. But flight MU-5735 was a Boeing 737-800. The 800 is a legacy model. It has a decades-long track record of incredible reliability, and it is fundamentally completely different from the controversial MAX. To truly grasp why the 800 is so different, we need to talk about MCAS. That stands for Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System. It was essentially a special, automated software installed by Boeing, designed to autonomously correct a plane's pitch, like pushing the nose down when flight conditions got unusual. Here's the fatal sequence with the MAX. To make the MAX engines more efficient, Boeing physically shifted them forward on the wings, but that physical shift created a dangerous new aerodynamic instability. So, as a sort of secret fix, they installed that MCAS software. Tragically, a faulty sensor on the MAX would erroneously trigger the software, forcing the planes into fatal nosedives. That exact failure cascade ultimately led the U.S. Department of Justice to fine Boeing $2.5 billion for defrauding the government over inadequate pilot training. But here is the major takeaway for us today. The Boeing 737-800, the exact plane that went down in China, does not have the MCAS software. Period. It doesn't have the engine placement issues either. And without that software, a mechanical failure causing a massive passenger jet to spontaneously enter a direct 90-degree vertical drop is practically aerodynamically impossible. So we can firmly and scientifically conclude this crash was not a repeat of those Boeing technical scandals. The machine itself didn't malfunction. Which brings us to part 4, the chilling conclusion. When machines don't fail, who does? So if we confidently rule out the weather and we unequivocally rule out a catastrophic Boeing design failure, we're left staring at a very narrow and, honestly, very chilling alternative. Aviation expert Neil Hansford puts it bluntly. He says unless an unimaginable accident occurred, like both wings spontaneously snapping off or a sudden missile strike, planes simply do not fall out of the sky like rocks. Because the aircraft was completely intact when the dive started, investigators conclude it's highly probable that this dive was intentional. Investigator Michael Daniel actually draws some truly terrifying parallels to rare historical anomalies. Take Egypt Air Flight 990 back in 1999, or Silk Air Flight 185 in 1997. Both of those flights share the exact same hallmark: sudden, extreme nosedives that completely defied all logic of mechanical failure. And in both of those tragic cases, extensive investigations concluded that a pilot or someone who had forcibly taken over the cockpit purposefully drove the aircraft into the ground. Naturally, when there isn't an immediate, simple explanation, the internet loves to fill the void. Wild conspiracy theories started swirling on Chinese social media, with some even trying to blame the US over geopolitical tensions from the Russia-Ukraine conflict. But analysts are totally clear. This is just typical post-disaster conspiracy noise with zero factual evidence. Instead of geopolitical fiction, air crash investigators remain laser-focused on the grim likelihood of foul play right there inside the cockpit.
Finally, part 5, are planes still safe? Let's put this anxiety into a statistical perspective.
Now, I know digesting an intense explainer like this, especially one that points toward intentional human action, can make you terrified to ever board a plane again. But let's ground ourselves in some hard, reassuring data. The reality of modern aviation safety is incredible. The Boeing 737-800 boasts an astronomically low crash rate of just 0.07 per 1 million flights. Even when you compare it to incredibly reliable older models like the Airbus A300 at 0.46, the 737-800's record is practically flawless. Statistically speaking, it remains one of the absolute safest ways to travel on the planet.
The big thing you should walk away with today is that commercial flight is safer right now than it has ever been. Accidental crashes caused by a patch of bad weather, standard mechanical wear and tear, or a sudden engine blowout, those are effectively a thing of the past. Today, extremely rare disasters are almost entirely boiled down to either highly isolated, unprecedented software faults, like we saw with the MAX, or deliberate, unimaginable human actions.
And that brings us to the ultimate crux of the modern aviation dilemma. We've actually successfully engineered machines that are so robust, so aerodynamically sound, that they practically cannot fail on their own. But it leaves us with this final, really vital question. As engineers continue to perfect the machine, how do we possibly safeguard against the one unpredictable variable we have left, the human mind sitting at the controls? Thanks for joining me.